Hey friends, this is Steve Guttenberg. This is the Audiophiliac Daily Show. I have a very, very special guest today, Ty Pendlebury from CNET. You're the associate editor?
Senior associate editor.
Senior associate editor. And that's not just because you're old. You're not senior.
Pretty senior, yeah.
Pretty senior? That's
you and me are pretty old.
Yeah, for CNET, we need the walkers. So, but anyway, I think that Ty is better equipped to tackle this subject than I am, which is stereo home theater. Now, I've done it for years and years and years, just taking the analog outputs of my Blu-ray player or DVD player before that, hooked them up to an integrated amp or my main system, and I was good to go. I had stereo home theater. But it seems like nowadays TVs and even Blu-ray players don't always have analog outputs, or cable boxes or satellite boxes. They don't have analog outputs anymore.
It seems antiquated technology now.
Who cares?
So almost nothing has an analog output. So me too, I've also used analog, or haven't used analog systems. I've used digital, obviously, but I've used an AV receiver in my house as my main stereo system for as long as I can remember. I've never been able to have a dedicated stereo system. My actual stereo system is the one sitting in front of me at my computer now. So that's about as stereo-y as I get.
Really?
Yeah. Once upon a time, I had this idea that I was going to have a record player connected to a separate system. But, New York apartments, there's just no room to do that. So, and I think for a lot of people, they want to be able to listen to music and watch movies on the same system.
Right.
And so that's why it's good to find a receiver that can do both things. And that's, as you know, Steve, it's something we used to do a lot at CNET, is test for both movies and music.
But this morning, in preparation for this great event, I found 3 stereo receivers, Denon, Onkyo, and Marantz. So these 3 receivers, they have HDMI inputs and outputs, but not for data, not for bit streams, not for Dolby or DTS, only PCM. So you're kind of screwed. I mean, you can convert from your cable box, whatever, and output PCM, I assume. That's not hard, right? But sort of like, seems like a half-ass way of doing it.
Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't have Dolby Digital. I guess because there is a licensing fee involved, and so that's the cost of the receiver. But it does seem like an extra step that the consumer has to take in that sending their TV to PCM, which is not always easy.
Yeah, right.
On which TV you have.
So that kind of puts the kibosh on that way of doing it, unless you really want to go that way. So maybe the simple workaround solution is just to get an inexpensive, or whatever your price range is, AV receiver and use it in stereo.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I don't think that there is necessarily a compromise, depending on which model you choose, in getting an AV receiver to play stereo music. A lot of these receivers have, as much as they work, a direct mode that cuts off all the circuitry, the AV circuitry, so you get supposedly a more pure circuit path. So, I've been using an Onkyo receiver for 6 months or so, and it sounds good. And depending on the model you get, we've liked Onkyo receivers for a while. I was always a big fan of Marantz. My first AV receiver was actually a Marantz. And Sony make good ones, Denon make good ones. So pretty much all the major brands make decent to really good sounding AV receivers for music.
Right. So that's it. So that makes it a pretty straightforward path, right? To do stereo home theater.
I think it's pretty easy to do, and I've used even though I have an AV receiver and have since I've lived in New York, which is almost 10 years, I've used a AV receiver in stereo only. So I've only had a pair of fronts, and that's it. I haven't had a center speaker in 10 years or more, and I don't miss it, because you're sitting so close to the TV. It doesn't really matter if you're not hearing the dialogue coming straight out of the middle of the TV. Even with, you've got 3 people sitting on our couch, it doesn't really matter. You're not really worrying about where on the path of the TV your image is coming out of. You're concentrating on the movie.
Right.
And it's only been
you just see that image of someone talking, your brain just puts it there anyway, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of people
Hears
put
it.
TVs above the fireplace. The image is all over the shop. So it doesn't need to come out. If it was fully, 100%, you'd have a center speaker right in the middle of the TV.
Right.
Which is, not possible.
Was it? Wait. Didn't Sony? I think we went to a demo once where the screen was the speaker. Remember that? It was Sony, right? I don't think that lasted.
That was only like a year or two
Seemed
ago.
like a good idea. Ideas.
Yeah, and I guess there's a simplicity to stereo. There's no wires. You don't have to put things around your house.
Yeah.
People balk at that. I mean, you can run under carpets and that sort of thing, but I like the simplicity of a stereo setup.
Yeah.
And you don't have to put holes in walls. You don't have to hang things. You don't have to do any of that. Whether it's a sound bar or a stereo system, basically it's a couple of cables and you're done.
Because, when I did some articles for Home Theater Magazine about mixing sound for movies, but this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I would sit in, these big New York mixing studios. They're mixing Hollywood movies. And I'd see these mix engineers discussing all sorts of tiny details, like footsteps and door slams and stuff. These conversations about a single door slam in a shot could go on for 2 hours. Maybe it sounds too loud. Maybe it sounds too woody. They would go on and on about the door slam. And I'd say, but I never see you guys talking about surround, where to place the surround mixes. And the lead engineer said to me, well, we think this, and remember, this is like 20 years ago. We think our job is to keep the viewer's attention in movie theaters and at home on the screen, not like, what's happening over there? No, we got to keep them focused forward. So we don't want to use surround as really discrete things happening that just sit back there behind you. They said, no, that's not the way that was not their aesthetic, at least at the time. I think surround has evolved to be more sort of atmospheric and just filling this space out. So the sound isn't just in front, it's just sort of this expansive stage. I think at its best, that's what surround can do.
Surround music and surround movies.
Yeah.
Because surround music's pretty much still a stunt. It's not real. 40
years on or whatever, they still haven't figured out what to do with surround music.
I listened to Dolby Atmos mixes of the Ramones.
Oh my God.
It was weird, man. So that's the reason I have a Dolby Atmos set up now, is to listen to the Ramones in 7.1.2. So and to your point, having that bubble is, I guess, what Atmos is supposed to do. It's supposed to create, a height dimension as well. So really having rear height speakers is completely nonsense. Don't do that. So having fronts, if you're going to have an Atmos system, put the Atmos modules in the front, because having it in the back, because I just mount my rear speakers high anyway. So you're supposed to have indirect sound. That's why bipolar and dipolar was so popular back in the day. Having rears, because it would give you an envelope of sound. It wasn't, you couldn't like pinpoint where the sound was coming from. That's what you want, because as you say, you're looking away from the screen to look at something, which takes you immediately out of the effect.
Out of the story, most important.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so it was pretty weird. So I like this concept, though, of Atmos, stereo Atmos. It's just this big thing. That's cool. I can get behind that.
Yeah, I mean, Atmos works. And particularly the ones that are direct radiating. When they're bouncing stuff, it's not as effectual, but funnily enough, I did look at a Sony soundbar that creates and it works pretty well. They've had this technology for a while, where they use psychoacoustics to make it seem like the effects are coming from somewhere up here, and it works. But as soon as you move your head, the effect just disappears. We haven't looked at any 2020 receivers this year because there haven't been any. There's been a Denon announcement last week, but the thing with receivers specifically is that they've had the same model for almost 5 years. Particularly with Sony, it's had the same model since I think 2017 or 2016.
Yeah, the 1080.
Yeah, the 1080, great receiver, but it doesn't have any of the latest bells and whistles. It's got Atmos, but it doesn't have, the latest, streaming protocols. It doesn't have the latest HDMI versions. So, for example, if you're trying to get HDR, I don't know if it can pass HDR or Dolby, what's it called? Vision. So you're missing out on that stuff. If you're into the cutting edge, you probably want to get a 2019 or 2020 receiver. But for music listening, if you have one which didn't even have HDMI, you could probably get away with, if you're just going to have a stereo system, you can probably get away with just an optical connection. And we're talking, what, 2005 probably? So if you're looking for secondhand, I mean, some of those old Marantas, would sound fantastic. One of my favorite receivers was the Sony ES, I want to say 5500, which came out about 2008. That just sounded phenomenal in stereo. And they haven't updated the ES receivers also in 4 or 5 years.
Huh.
But they moved into home automation, which I think was a weird step for them. But I guess they were trying to, appeal to integrators and people who set up systems for rich people, basically. I mean, you can talk about stereo home theater, but I think stereo or 2.1 home theater is even more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much for music. You've got to be very careful, I think, in setting up your system so that your subwoofer doesn't dominate. But I'm a big fan of having a sub, particularly for movies.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree. But if you have
most speakers can't drive.
If you have some reasonable tower speakers, if you have small speakers, yes, you should use a sub for stereo home theater. But if you have reasonably full range speakers, I think you can do okay with just the speakers themselves. It's not going to be as deep as a sub, but it'll be enough.
Yeah, I mean, and you save money that way too.
Yeah, and fewer wires. Everybody hates those wires. So. Let's use a wireless sub, of course.
I think that one of the advantages of having an AV receiver, particularly a newer one, is that you can stream directly from whatever service you use to that receiver. You don't need an extra box. You don't need a jack or anything like that. And usually it's a one-to-one connection from your phone directly to the receiver. And that's one advantage that you can't get with most stereo amplifiers without a dongle or some other doohickey. I'm still going to get you onto Roon.
Now that I'm a streaming guy, Roon is a little bit closer to happening, but still not really there. Because, I have this Blue Sound Node 2, and I like it. I use an external DAC, whatever the DAC is I'm using at that moment. But what I like about it is someone who's really new to it is just with this Blue Sound thing, their app is really seamless. Even I could figure it out really quickly. It doesn't, it just works. That's all I wanted to do. That's my needs are small. Just work. I don't need to. I want to read the manual every day or figure out how to do something. Just does it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I like things like Chromecast, open standards like that. Obviously there's a licensing fee involved, but something that can work with a bunch of different equipment and basically from your phone to a receiver that has Apple AirPlay 2 or Chromecast or even Spotify Connect, something that just takes that pain that having to juggle and think about, okay, well, I need to go to that input, having these standards on board your receiver just takes that out of it. You just open your app, and I think most people are using their phones to play music now.
Makes sense.
Yeah. The quality's better. You have Wi-Fi instead of Bluetooth. It doesn't drop out once you move out of the room or turn your phone off. That's another advantage to having a receiver, is that they have a lot of these standards on board. It's pretty seamless to play music.
So you have a bunch of these on a list at CNET that I can link to?
For sure.
Okay.
Definitely I've just updated the Spotify Connect how-to.
Okay.
And I mean, there's plenty of things on Apple AirPlay 2, Chromecast has just done recently. Obviously, I'm going to be very interested to see what happens with 2020 receivers, particularly, with the whole coronavirus thing, how far back they're going to push these things.
Right. They may become 2021 receivers.
Well, yeah, I mean, usually you see these in June or July, and I haven't heard a peep apart from Denon, and they were $1,000 plus ones. So usually where we sit is around the $500 mark, because I think that offers good bang for buck for most people. But yeah, we haven't heard anything. And Yamaha's probably going to keep with their 2019 release as well. Sony has no reason to release a 2020 receiver. So yeah, if you buy last year's, you're probably going to get A, money off the purchase, and B, it's still going to be up to date.
It's all good.
Yeah, no, I'm still excited about home theater and stereo music, and I'm glad that I get to do this and get to review these products, and because watching movies and music is pretty much what I do, and gaming as well. But there's a lot to be said for gaming with a surround system that actually is useful, and being able to hear stuff behind you makes more sense when you're gaming. But for movies, mostly it doesn't matter, and music obviously it doesn't matter. So to sum up, get an AV receiver.
Yeah.
And get a good one.
Channel.
Yeah, spend as much as you can afford. My rule of thumb is always to buy a receiver that's around the same price as your two front speakers. So if you've got, say, a $600 pair of stand mounts, get a $600 receiver. If you've got a $2,000 pair of towers, get a $2,000 receiver. And having a more powerful receiver or a more expensive receiver than your speakers is better than going the other way. Like I would say, you can spend $2,000 to $3,000 on a receiver and put them on a $300 pair of speakers if you want, but don't do the opposite.
Yeah, I did a piece about that recently, where if you like your speakers, wherever you are, if you like your speakers, don't think about upgrading your speakers. Just get better electronics to go feed your speakers. That's amazing. When I've done that with a lot of affordable speakers I've reviewed, and just put $1,000 amplifier on a $200 speaker, I like that. It's just amazing how much, if it's a good speaker in the first place, how good it can really sound.
Because the physics of actual pushing a piston, driving a woofer hasn't changed ever since loudspeakers were invented. You're still got to push air with an electric current. So they get better at making boxes and making drivers and stuff, but the physics is still the same. So there's not as much change in speakers as there is in electronics. It's new standards all the time.
Yeah.
So buying a new box to get new streaming features or new, video features is worthwhile.
Yeah. Go two-channel stereo for music, and 2.1 for home theater.
Right.
2.1. Yeah, there you go. Thanks.
You won't miss anything. You won't miss anything at all.
You won't miss a thing. You'll be so happy. Thank you. I think
right.
My name is Steve Guttenberg. This is the Audiophiliac Daily Show. Thank you to my guest, Ty Pendlebury. Thank everybody who's watching. Come back soon, and see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.